Disclaimer: we are not medical professionals or specialists. This is merely a conversation of our opinions. We are not contradicting anyone's personal views or values. This is our conversation. Topics such as suicide and abuse may also be discussed. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Hey Stigma Busters! Welcome to our 6th episode of the Living Beyond the Horizon podcast, Posh Mentality. Oh, how are we today?
I'm doing okay. I think I'm just a little tired because I'm a little worried because like new classes are starting, but other than that, so I'm okay. Zoe?
I'm doing good. I just woke up. It's a new day, new opportunities. How are you, Angela?
I'm okay. Same with Taz. New classes are starting, but I have this one class that I really enjoy, so I hope that goes well this year. And yeah.
All right. So
Today we'll be talking about anxiety.
What's anxiety, Zoe?
Anxiety is an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increase in blood pressure.
Anxiety is also the anticipation of fear, which is being afraid of something which is going to occur in a long time or just tomorrow, or being afraid of something that might not even happen. It's a physical and a mental experience where fear manifests itself into your thoughts, or it can show physically in your body as well. It's normal since everybody experiences anxiety from time to time, whether it's for a test or it's or going to a social gathering where you don't know a lot of people. But it's also very helpful because it's a very bad feeling that we don't really like, and then it alerts us of potential threats. And it's important to remember that it's only temporary. Right now, we are talking about the emotion, anxiety, that everybody feels. All right, so in terms of the emotion, anxiety is temporary. The sensation we feel when we are anxious is temporal, such as being sweaty, having clammy hands, having a racing heartbeat, etc. And anxiety can also help us reach important goals. It prepares us for events such as big conversations or getting a car license, because we may be afraid of some fears, some things that might go wrong while we are getting there or while we are doing our dream job or whatever. And it helps us recognize and assess what's going on in the situation, what we have to do to keep us and others safe. And so anxiety and challenges go hand in hand.
yeah, definitely. I think anxiety can often be looked at in a very negative way as well. Like there are very negative aspects because it can definitely take over your thoughts sometimes, and it's an irrational fear, right? Anxiety. So it can often be something that overcomes something you want to do, and it kind of sets you back. But I feel like if we learn to manage it and kind of like notice when we're having those type of anxious feelings, then it can definitely be used in a more positive way, what's going to move us forward and not push us back, right? I think one of the main ones I can think of at the top of my head is like as a swimmer, right, going in for swim meets, I usually get really anxious before I go for like, a swim. I'll go for a meet or one of my races. And there were some cases like in the very beginning where I'd be so nervous and my limbs would just be jelly and I'd be swimming and I'd get the worst time ever. But I think as I became more experienced and I realized like, you're not going to drown. No one's going to kill you. It's okay, if your time isn't as great as you wanted it to be. It definitely was my anxiety that I inevitably did have. It instead pushed me where I was like, it motivated me. Just like, you know what? Like, let's do this. It gave me that boost of adrenaline that I needed before I kind of jumped into the water. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can also agree with my experience. Like anxiety helped me multiple times to get me past that finish line, both physically and mentally. I remember doing, no, I remember going like first into clubs, and I was in exec team, and I didn't know particularly much about the topic at the time, especially let's say eco gardening. So it really pushed me to do my research and also, yeah, to study more about the topic and get to know about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Angela?
For me, anxiety has usually been surrounded like between like when I'm talking with friends or when I get home and I'm thinking about what I did that day. Because like even though I do have like I do get anxious during tests and exams, right? But I feel like I get a lot more anxious when I'm with, let's say, people that I would say are my friends, but I'm not super close with, so I'm still like, what do I do now? Will they think I'm weird for doing this thing?
Oh,
And I
yeah.
just sort of overthink everything. And then like when I get back home, right, or like say that I text a friend, right, and they don't respond immediately. Okay, at first it'll be like, okay, it's okay, they're probably busy. And after like 2 or 3 or so hours, I'm like, okay, what did I do to make them mad at me? And I'll just be super anxious until they text me back. And then I'll just be like, are they mad at me? Or were they just busy? Or do they hate me? And I like overthink all of these possible scenarios. It's very unlikely that any of them will actually happen. Shouldn't feel good, you know? Not like smiling or being happy or being with your friends. But I feel like it's also very important not pathologize it. It's important to know that it's also a healthy thing to have.
Yeah, and pathologizing just means psychologically just seeing as something abnormal or unhealthy, right? So I think we kind of mentioned that in a sense of like we shouldn't really put anxiety in that very abnormal and healthy kind of situation, right? Because emotion of anxiety, right? It can help us to stay safe and develop new skills. I think one of the main ones, obviously, I can think of is like, just are you getting out of your comfort zone, right? That's how you're going to grow. And as soon as you get out your comfort zone, you are going to have a bit of that anxiety, especially I think with new classes and new study or like studying more than you usually do, right? It does give that brink of anxiety. I'm like, will I be able to do it? Or is it going to be boring? Is it going to be hard? Am I going to, burn out and stuff like that? But I think once you get over that threshold of just like, what, let's just try this, right? That when you kind of get out of your head, which can be hard sometimes, but you kind of just like, what, let's F all your emotions, just go for it, right? So then I think definitely anxiety, and I also think anxiety, like when you're scared of, like, let's say for a test, right? You're scared of a test and you kind of have the anxious, like, you have to study for it. That kind of motivates you to go study for it. But at times that anxious feeling can actually set you back and cause you to procrastinate, right? So I think it goes hand in hand. I think the next point is like if we pathologize healthy anxiety, right? Not this negative anxiety, right? And if we can control our anxiety, we can focus on the symptoms of anxiety and not the situation we must adapt to, right? You look at a situation. Usually it's not the situation, but just the way we react to it, right? That's how it kind of plays out. So, yeah.
Yeah. And now let's sort of move on into anxiety disorder, which is a very common disorder that many people have. And there has been a significant sort of increase in past years of youth and teens having anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the type that may not be as temporary as the one that we feel that everybody feels. So for feeling anxious about like a test or an exam, once it's over, it's over. Once that day is over, you feel completely fine, right? But with anxiety disorder, it's sort of like a constant nagging.
Mm-hmm.
So the amygdala, just a quick reminder, is the part of the brain, and it's responsible for the fight, flight, or freeze system. That's part of your sympathetic nervous system as well. So the fight, flight, or freeze sort of system is just that when you encounter a problem or a situation where you feel maybe unsafe for you in any way, you have 3 options that your brain will choose. So the first one is flight, which would be to run away. So for example, in like the Ice Age or whatever, our ancestors, when they encountered a predator, such as, I don't know, a tiger or a lion or a bear, they would have run or flight. Now, say that you have a test, flight would sort of be like you don't do the test. You run away from it completely. You just get it out of your mind. You don't do it at all. Fight would be to stay. So like fight the bear or the predator, or it would be to do the test. You go through it, and a lot of people say that this is probably one of the better ways to fight your anxiety sort of feeling, because you actually go through it, and in the end you're like, nothing bad happened. I got through it. I got through it. I'm okay now. I can relax now. And next time I will be even more prepared for a test or whatever other situation you're going through. And then the last one is freeze. So with freeze, you just stand still. So, and like a long time ago, our ancestors, for freeze would be sort of like playing dead, but now it would be like just standing there, or like you just don't know what to do. You're just standing there in hopes of the test just going away before your eyes and nothing bad happens to you. You just sort of stand there.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think for anxiety disorders, right? It's your amygdala is kind of switched on all the time. And obviously you can't self-diagnose yourself, but like I often feel like, usually like especially with anxiety, like I can't directly relate to the anxiety disorder because I don't think I have an anxiety disorder, but usually when I have that chronic anxiety, it's usually because something is running at the back of my head and I usually don't, well, it's at the back of my head and I'm not directly paying attention to it, but it's there, right? And you still have that very like, dropping sensation in your stomach or in your chest area where you're kind of just like, oh, right? And you're kind of just like anxious about that. But yeah.
So for people who have anxiety, their fight, flight, or freeze system, FFF system, begins to sort of malfunction, as Taz said. And then so it goes off when there isn't any like danger, any actual challenges. So it does happen all the time, like Taz mentioned. And it's very intense because, well, it is a survival system. And so it's very difficult to do daily tasks, even just like brushing your teeth. And it causes that person to experience that distress and that anxious feeling basically all the time. Stops them from doing fun things like going out with their friends, going to see a movie, and it prevents them from doing important things too, such as school or work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anxiety in general, if it's not something, even disorder or not, but if it's not something you can learn to control, it can be so hard to overcome. Like I know for, again, like for my work, like especially like, I'm scared to start this new class or new assignment and I'm just sitting there just like, okay, we got to start it. But then you kind of have like, what if it's not perfect? What if I don't like it? What if it's not what I want to do with my life, right? And just there's a lot of thoughts that come with it, and you're kind of just like, you come to the point, I think for me, like when I start doing it, it's like, what, who cares, let's just try it, right? And you kind of like abandon those emotions, or so for me it's not necessarily controlling the anxiety yet, but just like ignoring it or like pushing it aside and getting out of my head. But yeah, everyone kind of copes with anxiety in different ways. Some people might have a dog or a pet to calm them down in different situations, right? Or like I know exercise is a way to kind of just relieve that anxiety and stress as well.
It's very important to have good coping mechanisms and good coping habits. And there are also some treatments that you can do, somebody with anxiety can do, which we will talk about near the end. And then so there's also a very cute one where people who have social or generalized anxiety can have a dog or another pet to help calm them down in different situations.
Hmm.
So we do want to talk about the curse of avoidance.
The curse of avoidance. Many people choose to avoid things that are unpleasant, but the constant avoidance of anxiety triggers and causes anxiety to increase. So when you experience anxiety, your curves go up. And what a normal curve would look like, it would go up, and then you would ride out the wave. Let's say, let's use a roller coaster, for example. And it would ride and it would end. And that would be a healthy curve. But with people with anxiety, if you choose to avoid it, it would go up and it would have an immediate, when you remove yourself from that situation, let's say I'm going to a test and I'm walking into the room and I immediately go out because I couldn't tolerate the anxiety, and it would go in a very steep slope back down, and then that would be the end of it. You didn't particularly ride out the whole curve, so the next time when you go to do another test, the anxiety level would increase and it'll be higher than before. This would go over time and it'll go even higher and it'll go even steeper.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think avoiding the situation, right? Because at first you're really, really scared of it, and then you kind of you remove yourself from there right away, right? Because you're right before. And then I think especially right before you're doing this task, you build up so much anxiety as it is, right? So when you come to do it again, you're kind of just, like you're more scared because you don't want to feel that way again.
Yeah,
As
I
well.
remember
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember doing a presentation and I was last, and I got so nervous that I had to go to the washroom the- right before I go in, and that just delayed the inevitable where I had to do the presentation anyways. But I remember like after in grade 7 where I had to do presentations constantly because my teacher was, I think I mentioned this, my teacher was a big advocate for leadership, and we would have to do presentations like every week, and like maybe there was an emergency, I had to step in for like MC, and that would be like a last minute thing. And we did the presentation so much that we got used to it over time, so we didn't feel that anxious feeling. And if we did, it will drive us more to improve. And that's how, yeah, it's just really getting used to it and riding out that wave. It's like a roller coaster. You don't get out of the roller coaster while it's still moving. So you gotta ride out the wave.
So, what goes on in your body while you are going through all of those thoughts and all of those emotions? Well, there are two nervous systems in your body. The first one is a parasympathetic one, and the next one is a sympathetic one. Let's first talk about the sympathetic system. So the sympathetic system can also sort of be called the FFF, or fight, flight, freeze system. And what it does is that it helps to get your body ready for whatever challenge you're going to face. So the first one is your eyes. It's going to dilate your pupil, meaning that your pupil will become bigger. And while you are going through this challenge, you're going to be focusing on directly what's in front of you, and things that are around you, such as peripheral vision, is going to fade away a little bit. Next, because you are not eating and you are facing a challenge, your sympathetic system is also going to inhibit your saliva. So you are not going to you're not going to produce any saliva in your mouth because, well, it's not needed, right? And then that leads to a common symptom of feeling anxious, or for people with anxiety disorder, is a dry mouth. Next, your sympathetic system is going to accelerate your heartbeat, and so meaning that you are going to be breathing a lot more with your lungs too. And your lungs are going to be working a lot harder to keep up with that, and your heart is going to be beating a lot faster. It also is going to stop digestion in your stomach so that your body can bring its energy towards your brain, your muscles, and your legs, your arms, wherever you need the attention to help you get through this challenge. And there's also things going on in your liver, your kidneys, your intestines, and your bladder. And some of these will relate back to some symptoms such as a dry throat, or, relaxing your bladder will cause you to feel the urge to go to the washroom. And so all of these things are done to help you fight a challenge. And of course, since it's your body, it's going to be more to the physical aspect instead of the mental or emotional aspect. So that's also great to know. And the other nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system, which can also be called the rest and digest system. So this system is in motion when you are doing some relaxing things, such as watching a movie, going out with your friends. You're not necessarily going through a challenge during this time.
So for the parasympathetic nervous system, so it's involved in maintaining homeostasis. So homeostasis is basically, maintaining stability, and also permits the rest and digest response. So the parasympathetic system aims to bring the body to a state of calm, just like Anne just said, and has comparatively longer neuron pathways and hence a slower response time. It reduces your heartbeat, right? Muscle relaxes, your pupils will contract, and right, because you're in a more calming situation, your saliva secretion increases digestive secretion. So then there's no such functions like, how we had the fight or flight situation in the sympathetic system, right? So your heartbeat is going to be fine, right? It's going to be at a more normal pace. Your muscles are not going to tense up. And I think one of the major ones, right? You're at a calm, so your blood flow is going to be kind of, if it's at a normal pace, it's going to be spreading through all your body parts and not just, the main parts and your muscles, right? In situations with a flight or fight response, where you have to run away from a threat. So yeah, I think that's one of the main definitions. Use your sympathetic nervous system for more, immediate threat situations, and parasympathetic is when, you're kind of leveling down from a situation, or just like your normal day-to-day, situation where you're calmer and you're at a more regular pace, right? More regular situations when you're not, at a or you don't feel like you're at a life and death situation. I think other than that, those are kind of the main, just remembering the main part is the sympathetic is more involved in your flight or fight response, and parasympathetic is more involved in the calming state, the calmer state of different parts of your life.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what is done to help people with anxiety disorder.
All right, so treating anxiety. So I think when we talk about, tolerating the steep anxiety curve, right? So when we talk about the anxiety curve raising, right, because you kind of avoid the situation, right? I think one of the main coping ones would be, facing this anxiety. So the next time when you face the anxiety curve, that peak will be much lower. I think Ms. White, our response teacher, she said some people, they would directly put the person in the room with one of their fears, right? And you can't leave. And obviously that's a bit more severe. But I think preparing yourself for a situation where, you kind of have the right coping mechanisms, right, to deal with the situation would definitely decrease the anxiety curve. And the different ways you can do this. So I think one of to decrease this tall anxiety curve, one of them is pharmacological.
So there are two main things that can be given to help sort of treat anxiety. The first one are benzodiazepines. Please excuse my pronunciation. They're more known as benzos, maybe, or Xanax, I think. So what that benzos does is that it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you remember what we just talked about, it's the system that's like the rest and digest sort of system, and it helps you sort of relax and everything. There are two main sort of pharmacological treatments that can be used to help treat people with anxiety disorder. So the first one is benzodiazepines. Please excuse my pronunciation. They are also known as benzos or Xanax. And the other one is antidepressants.
Right, and these kind of for the benzos in particular, it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. So, right, this is your calming system, right? The system that kind of calms you down, and it kind of, I guess, turns on that response system and kind of, so it turns it on so you can kind of just relax, and your blood. I think that one of the things that I think it may do is it definitely calms down your heartbeat, your muscles relax, right? Your saliva secretion increases and your digestive increases, and it kind of just hits these main parts of your body that will aid in calming you down, especially during a flight or fight situation. And I think this is something that you can use, right, if you're going into a very anxious situation, but right, it gives you that immediate response, immediate like happiness, but again, it's also very addictive. It's a very addictive drug. So, right, because it gives you that immediate happy feeling. I know I was watching a YouTuber and her husband passed away, and he had an anxiety disorder, and I believe he had depression too, and he'd be using these drugs, right? In the morning, he'd take these drugs just to get that immediate happy feeling. So, like he'd feel productive during the day, but it's one of those things. He got such a high from them that when he went to sleep, he had to take drugs to, kind of loosen him up, kind of, not have him have all these like rushing right thoughts at night, so he can go to sleep, so he can kind of slow down. And it kind of became a very vicious cycle of him like very you can't you come to the point where you need them, right, for a lot of individuals. And right, and you kind of, and I feel like when you get addicted to these, you kind of forget how to cope with them, how to cope with situations without it, right? And because you get that immediate happy feeling, you don't need any coping skills if the medicine is going to provide that for you already, right? And that kind of brings us to the importance of therapy, right?
So it's important to not rely on medicine and drugs so much as for it to come to that point where, some people will unfortunately overdose, or, other bad stuff might happen. And the thing is that, like, it's sort of like, to relate to a more sort of casual topic is coffee. So some people, they will have coffee every day, and it comes to a point where one cup of coffee, the caffeine in there is just not enough. So they keep on adding more cups of coffee on there until there's just like consuming 10 cups of coffee or something crazy like that. And though it is sort of common for especially like people under pressure, such as first responders or people going through university and having a tough time, but it's like your body's going to sort of adapt to the amount of caffeine or the amount of drugs that you put in your body. And you'll continue putting more and more to like help you get that consistent happy feeling. And then that's just going to lead to something that, not a lot of people are going to like as much. And it's important to still be aware while you are using whatever substance you're using to be careful while using it. And it's also a factor to why a lot of doctors and pharmacies don't give things like benzos or Xanax out to everyone, because it's only used for very serious cases.
Prescription drug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, like Taz said, that just makes therapy all the more important.
Yeah, I think just like adding again to the pharma, I think there are people who definitely have the need for medicine, right? It's something that they can't control right now. But I feel like, again, putting the importance on therapy is so important, right? Again, putting on therapy, right? So on the topic of therapy, one of the things that people might use are behavioral patterns. So building a ladder of what you're scared of, right? Like starting low, starting at the bottom, right? It's just like little increments of whatever your fear is, exposing yourself to very little amounts before building your way up to maybe the full thing, or maybe something scarier, just so it's not like you're going from 0 to 100 real quick, right? 1 to like 100, the level real quick, but you're kind of going 1, 2, 3, and all the way to 100 that way, right? You have that time to kind of manage one stressor before you go on to something that's only a little bit more scarier, and it doesn't feel like as big of a jump. So that's one of the things that people usually do for therapy. And another one is cognitive patterns, right? I think this is something that I think a lot of people need to work on, right? Whether you have an anxiety disorder or not, but just the way you talk to yourself, right? I think a lot of negative self-talk also feeds a lot of the anxiety, right? Because our thoughts become our words, right? And our words become our actions. So I think, saying I'm stupid, I'm foolish, I'm dumb, like I'm scared of this, I can't do this, just things like that definitely push a situation down and make, or, you know, like making a situation just scarier because, right, again, it's, I don't want to say it's all in your head, but right, it's something that you're scared of. And I think when we start going down this spiral of negative self-talk, right, it can definitely manifest itself, right? It can definitely become reality, right? Because we approach the situation in that negative way. And then another one is managing the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, right? And these are coping skills, right? Things like, you know, physically, things you can do physically to manage these systems. So like coping skills such as breathing and mindfulness, which would definitely lower these down, which would definitely help manage the sympathetic and parasympathetic. I think another one would definitely be exercise, right? That way you can release these emotions as well. So yeah. I think there are a lot of hormones too that
Can be released.
Yeah, a lot of hormones are released too. Hormones that, you know, I think, I'm not too sure, but like hormones that either cause anxiety or would actually boost. I know there's some hormones that when you exercise definitely kind of boosts it. Like I think especially like with dopamine too, like exercise definitely helps with that too. And you kind of get that happy feeling naturally instead of on medicine or, you know, just things like that. But again, I don't want to say that people who use medicine are people like, okay, it's bad, right? Because some people actually need it. But creating a balance between the two and putting importance on therapy as well is very important, right? It's not something that should be ignored, especially when you come in a situation where you do not have your medicine. And again, these medicines, like I know for a fact, like they do have other side effects too, right? So just being mindful of both of them and not depending on one of them, right, is not depending on one of them in the sense of like medicine, right, is important.
I feel like therapy gets such a bad reputation sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like something that like even people will just throw around casually, such as, bro, you need to go to therapy. Really.
What?
It's like it's that word that's thrown around very casually, and then it scares people that actually want to go or think that they might need to go or want to go to ask some questions. It like it stops them in their tracks because they're afraid of what other people are thinking about them if they do start going. You know, if they do, should they keep it a secret? Who can they trust? And all of those cognitive sort of patterns, they're just thoughts. You know, they're not facts. Okay, so
Yeah.
like if true that's your thoughts because you make some mistakes, and even if you don't do well, there's definitely something that may not be academically that you are absolutely amazing
Exactly.
doing.
But I think especially when it comes to those things, you have to remember that it's part of the journey. It's not the destination. And especially, you know, like being teenagers ourselves, right? I think we often we don't live in the moment a lot, and we kind of think too much into the future as well. So if we make this mistake, our future is going to be like, you know, bombarded, when really that test, you know, won't matter in 2 weeks. And just, you know, or even 1 week or even a day after. Do you know what I mean? It's just things like that as well. I think making a divide as well between, you know, what's actually there and what's something you're thinking of. Does that make sense? You know, like not exaggerate the situation. See the situation as it is, right? Seeing the situation as it is and not, you know, placing such like it's the end of the world into the box and just my parents are going to hate me, my friends are going to hate me, and just seeing it like that. So I think, yeah. Anxiety is a normal emotion everyone goes through. It can be a really tough emotion to get through, but if we show compassion and understand why we get these emotions, we can carry on to the point to learning how to control it and use it in a way which will motivate us and not set us back. Do not compare yourself to others, as anxiety comes in many different forms and everyone's reasons, subconscious and conscious, are different. Next time, look at your challenge or think about it. What can you do to adapt? And remember, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Posh Mentality. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you in the next one. Stigma Busters out.